compared to any other technology, I've seen more people worried about it earlier in its life cycle. So I feel optimistic.
Google Chief Sundar Pichai on the rapidity of generative AI. Many states and localities are worried about it too, and they're doing something about it, making AI safe for government. On this cover story episode of The Future in Context. Coming up.
TFIC takes you deeper into the stories that are shaping the future of state and local government.
Final frontier. To boldly go where no man has gone before.
You're not Buzz Lightyear.
I'm Siri.
And I'm Google.
And I am Alexa.
Alexa seems so smart. I think we'd have a lot to talk about.
Pew, pew.
From government technology and governing, this is The Future in Context. With Ashley Silver, I'm Paul Taylor. On this episode, we are going all in on AI because, well, everybody else is. The cash infusion into artificial intelligence has ballooned from $2.9 billion in 2019 to $28 billion last year. That level of infusion has spawned innovation, and that innovation has spawned hype. All levels of government are pivoting to take advantage of the opportunities while mitigating potential downsides. Government technology has dedicated almost all of its March issue to that work.
It captures all of the policy work being done across the country to put a framework or guardrails around generative AI to help ensure it is deployed thoughtfully and ethically in state and local government. We had the chance to talk with two colleagues who reported features for the AI cover package, Julia Ettinger and Nikki Davidson, plus Laura Kincaid, the managing editor who pulled it all together.
Lauren, let's begin with you. In trying to figure out generative AI in government, policy matters. In fact, that's the name that you gave the cover story package this month. The amount of energy behind AI adoption in government is undeniable, but public agencies are also putting in some defenses at the same time.
Whatever guardrails we put in place need to make sure that AI is used safely in terms of security. It protects privacy. It's free of bias, hopefully, to the most that it can be, the extent that it can be. That, because we don't know how it's going to change. So you have to be able to remain kind of agile in the face of whatever comes next. So the jurisdictions that our writer Adam Stone talked to are really some of the ones who are so New Jersey has been a real front runner in AI. They released their first guidelines, I think I want to say November. And interestingly, between when he wrote and reported this story and when we went to press with it, Beth Novak, who was the chief innovation officer for New Jersey for a long time, is now their first chief AI strategist. That happened while we were editing the magazine. We changed it in there just to show you the speed at which this is all changing. But her big thing is, and I think this goes across the others we talked to are Seattle and California, is talk about AI, have a conversation about it. We need to talk about them in order to get something done, demystify it. I think that's a really important part of what all three of these places are doing.
And that idea carries through to the other two features. Julia, you focused on where agencies begin with AI. Where exactly is that?
There is so much to unpack in this space. We are starting to see some federal regulation with the executive order from Biden in October. We have a lot of states and localities moving forward with frameworks of their own, whether that's generative AI policies or launching task force to kind of guide further use. There's a lot of different approaches, but I think the common theme that we're seeing from government is a lot of excitement about the possibilities that this technology can unlock.
You cite about a handful of states, there's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Utah, Washington, and New Jersey, that have been early movers in this space. What can the other 45 states learn from them?
Well, I think that something that is important to learn from these states is that regardless of how any government agencies feels about it, AI is going to be continuing to advance. And new AI tools and applications are going to continue to be developed. So the key advice that I'm hearing from public sector officials is to start moving forward. Now, I think what that means for your organization might differ from what it means for another organization, and so might your approach. Some government agencies like New Jersey and Utah have led with policy. New Jersey has also established a task force to guide AI implementation, and similar task forces have been established in states like Alabama and Massachusetts and Wisconsin. So I think regardless of the approach your organization takes, you don't want to wait to start exploring what this technology will mean for those that you serve, because the technology is already here.
Part of Dave Fletcher's legacy in Utah was the creation of the Center of Excellence in AI. How does that Center of Excellence approach differ or distinguish itself from the other models you looked at?
I think what's particularly interesting about Utah's Center of Excellence in AI is that it's been around for a little while now. It's been around for about 5 years. It was established in 2018. So that was prior to all of the buzz about generative AI that we've been hearing for about the past year or so. And for the state of Utah, the center really has helped enable representatives from multiple agencies to work together and explore the best practices in the space. And by starting to explore this technology early on and in a collaborative way, the state was also able to be an early adopter of policy on generative AI in 2023. And the state's already seeing the impact of these tools.
How so?
The state of Utah is using AI in cybersecurity, and Chief Information Security Officer Phil Bates, he cited the improved quality and actionability of threat detection alerts when using AI in the cybersecurity space as compared to before they started using AI.
So let's click down into the local level. Your piece talks about Santa Cruz County, California, serving kind of as a model in adopting AI policies. Tell us more about that, what they're doing, and what makes them noteworthy.
In the process of creating this policy, Santa Cruz County started exploring if and how AI tools were being used already and determined there were over 36,000 unique use cases. So the advice that Friend offered for other governments is to operate from the understanding that both your employees and your community are already using AI. And I think the sooner that governments understand that, the sooner they can get involved in shaping the policy debate for their community and beyond.
Interesting. There's also the city of Wentzville, Missouri, and AI may have put them on the map. At least they put them on our radar.
Because it's a smaller city, people often maybe think that it wouldn't be one of the first to adopt something like in the vein of emerging technologies, but it seems that the city's size actually helped enable the city to take more of an agile approach to guiding AI adoption. So the city now has a policy in place to govern the use of AI, but initially they started with just piloting the tools, and they took this hands-on approach to allow city leadership to understand how the technology might impact both government and constituents so that the policy could then be tailored more specifically to how AI might actually be used in Wentzville. It wasn't just a free-for-all, though, where AI could be tested without any guidance or regulation, because the city did have previously existing guidance, such as its ethics policy. And while that might not specifically address AI, it would help ensure that any use would be aligned with the understanding that the city employees serve the public. So Wentzville is already using AI in certain pieces of communication, but they do still have the human oversight component in place.
Were you able to talk to anybody about exactly how their ethics policy informed the AI experimentation?
I think that is something that is being seen by a lot of governments, is trying to take the new policy that would focus on AI and make sure that it aligns with previous policies that they already had in place. And I think a lot of that does focus on ethics. A lot of that does focus on the human-centered component and how it will affect the communities that they serve. And then I think there's another big component of policy that's already in place in this space, and that is data, which I'm sure we'll get into later.
Let's get into it now. What a great segue. Nikki, let's bring you into the conversation. Headline in your piece reads, "Good AI needs good data." And there's an unpaid bill in government as it moves towards an AI-informed future. It puts an old problem, garbage in, garbage out, really on steroids. What is the problem, and what are governments doing about it?
That's a great question, because the problem is data governance itself. So when I was reporting this story, I came across an interesting data statistic from NASCIO's 2023 CIO survey. It was that 69% of the CIOs reported they were only in the beginning stages of their data governance, and 27 considered their data governance to be mature. But that is messy data on its own, because I interviewed Doug Robinson from NASCIO, and he says he doesn't believe those statistics. So he actually asked some of the agencies that replied that they had a mature data governance, because he was skeptical, and they ended up saying, well, we actually just replied that way because we think we're better off than a lot of other people, which is not actually the question. So, and data governance to me as a data reporter is just so fascinating. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't completely understand on the surface unless you're working with the numbers. So I came up with an analogy here for you guys. Let's say I'm doing a data project and I am going to ask AI to make me the best possible soup out of everything that I have in my fridge. So, and I've actually used AI to do something like this before. It's really cool. So I recommend it. But here's some considerations that you would have to think about. So I ask AI to make the best soup possible considering all of the data in my fridge. So all of the things in my fridge, kind of try to decide what kind of soup would be really good for me. But what would happen is I'm not organized. My fridge has a bunch of messy stuff in it. So I have expired food. So AI might put in that expired food in my soup. That's gross. We don't want that. But that is relevant when it comes to agencies that have been collecting data for a while, maybe pre-COVID, and then you're looking at that data now. It's a different world now. It's not really relevant anymore. So that could kind of skew the results. And then we have like mystery containers, like leftovers that I didn't make a note about how old they are or where they came from or what exactly they are. So the AI may or may not put that into the soup, might get food poisoning from that because who knows what it really is. And then there's duplicates. And this is a problem that I run into so many times just looking through government data. So I have like 3 different containers of sour cream because I went to the store forgetting that I already had sour cream in there. So when you think about something like that and what AI is going to make from that, it's not what you're hoping for. And that's kind of the problem that a lot of governments are facing when they're using the data sets that they have, because a lot of that data has not been cleaned, it's not complete, it's not up to date, a lot of other things that are the best practices. And really, to get to those best practices, you need to have data governance. So it goes back to that survey question. If we have so few agencies that have established a mature data governance program so everybody knows what's in the fridge, what to put in the fridge, how to label what's in the fridge, if you don't have that, then it's just a big, messy pile of data.
Yes, and you take these mystery items out of the fridge, combine it with AI's tendency to hallucinate, and heaven knows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Great point.
I know that this isn't linear, but you mentioned data governance. There's also data literacy, quality improvement projects, and policy development. Have states or localities figured out how all those glue together in some way that makes sense?
I think they're working on figuring it out, and some are really putting a lot of effort into it. So, for this story, I did talk to Josh Martin. He's the chief data officer for Indiana, and they're doing a lot of interesting things in Indiana with data. They're doing data literacy training. Obviously, that's so important to make sure that all the employees that are using the data or entering data understand what the rules are and why it's important. They also just recently came out with a new data policy requiring pre-deployment assessments. And that would be, looking at the data, making sure everything is complete. There are a couple other agencies that are doing data audits. These are all different types of strategies that agencies are taking. I don't know that anyone can say that they found like the best way to do this yet. It's going to continue to evolve, especially as how we store our data, what data we collect continues to change as well.
In the piece, you make the point that both data audits and readiness assessments are not one and done, that these need to be recurring as the process is. First, I suppose the amount of data discovery continues, but also as the campaigns to incorporate AI continue. Talk a little bit about that and what you're seeing in the States.
I mean, especially when you're talking about data audits, you can take that fridge analogy that we just talked about as well. Like, you might have a clean fridge one month and then the next month it's a big mess again, especially when we're talking about governments where, there is staff turnover, there is employee turnover. And as we continue to explore emerging technologies, there'll just be changes in duties and roles on who's actually recording the data. So it's important to make sure that those audits are on a continuous cycle, because as we know in government, people aren't going to just take their government job and stay in that specific role for the rest of their life. I think that would horrify a lot of government workers if they were confined to that kind of environment.
But those government workers need to be ready to evaluate who they're going to be working with. And you mentioned vendor selection in the process, but there need to be competencies within governments of people who are evaluating who to work with. Does anybody have a criteria for that yet?
Most agencies aren't going to be creating their own tools. Some will, which is great, but most are going to be using vendor products. So that's where it comes into making sure that they're talking with those companies and really understanding what they are doing with the data and how their data governance program works as well.
Yeah, and there's a divide in the industry, and we saw that when ChatGPT and OpenAI blew up, the people who wanted a go slow safe approach and the people who wanted growth fast at any cost. Did anybody you talked to pursue that at all or particularly concerned about that?
Whether or not to kind of like press the brakes or press the gas was something that we talked about a lot. And I would say that most data experts for this story had said very similar things, which is press the brakes with your foot close to the gas, I guess. I think anybody that is familiar with data the way that they are understands that there's a lot of potential, but it needs to be done the right way. It's definitely not something to sleep on and just say this isn't going to be something that we can use. However, they just want to make sure that it's used the right way. And I think that they're very aware of the specific risk and the data governance problems that already exist that would pose those specific risks.
What surprised you in your reporting?
I mean, honestly, the fact that even the NASIO survey data can have its own limitations, and just the idea that government workers themselves are still just kind of figuring out things as they go as far as data. It's so hard to get the right way to do this down when we're so new in this landscape.
John Perry Barlow, a former lyricist for the Grateful Dead and a cyberpunk in his own right 20 years ago, he said just to remember that we're all bozos on this bus. And that's true in government, in industry, and I dare say the journalists that cover them. We don't know what we don't know. Julia, what surprised you in your reporting?
Well, I'm still a little surprised at just the rate at which we're seeing policies be created, especially at a federal level. I think a lot of state and local governments are still kind of waiting. I know we're starting to get further in that space, but I think they're still kind of waiting for that federal guidance. But they're still moving forward in their own right. And I think that's something that's a little bit surprising. And I just want to also note on what Nikki was saying about the importance of data is I think it's really going to be important that policymakers and data experts really come together to find a solution when it comes to governing AI. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all solution, but I think that there's a lot to be learned from all of the people already doing the work.
In terms of runway, what do you think is next?
I think we're going to continue to see a lot of legislation continue to progress. We have some things in Congress that are kind of touching on different pieces of AI in terms of like the Algorithmic Accountability Act, and we have the AIRIAA. And so I think we are going to continue to see progress with those. Also, I think we're going to continue to learn lessons from other governments and other pieces of legislation around the world. With the EU AI Act advancing, I think that's going to be kind of another guiding light for governments here in the US. At its heart, it keeps the human rights aspect at the center. And I think that's a really important piece of it. In terms of how AI is used, it wants to make sure that human rights aren't being violated. And I think that's the main risk that we need to be addressing. There are some specific uses of this technology that are prohibited in the EU AI Act, but they are, for the most part, prohibited with some exceptions. So I think that's something that we'll be able to learn from and maybe explore whether we think that the US needs to go further in our own regulation, or if we need to maybe scale it back and allow for more freedom. I think that's still to be determined.
Very good. Nikki, what's next?
Learning how to manage government data. I think that we're going to see a lot more agencies that do not have data officers add people like that to the team. And I think some agencies that already have one are going to start to add entire offices. And one thing that was talked about in my interviews was that there's probably going to be some mistakes that happen before then, some money that's going to be lost, but it's going to be a very important lesson that some agencies will learn, and they'll learn from, and then they're going to kind of reevaluate how they deal with their data.
So is there anything that we haven't talked about but should have?
There are risk factors regarding how AI can be used. I believe that Ted Lieu, who was recently appointed as a co-chair of the new House Bipartisan Task Force on AI, he put it really well. He said AI risks kind of fall into three categories. The first is AI that can destroy the world. The second is AI that won't destroy the world, but it could kill some people. And the third is AI that won't kill anybody, but it could still provide harm. And that's AI and things like hiring. And I think that's where we need to really focus. And I think that's where the data piece really comes into play.
Nicely said. Thank you both for your reporting. And
yeah, thanks for having us here.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Lauren, let's bring you back into the conversation. AI didn't eat the entire issue. What else is in there?
You're right, it did not eat the entire issue, although it did take up a good chunk. I would like to give a brief shout out to a column from my colleague Ben Miller, who wrote a piece that is about AI, so just to go back on that a minute, called Spilling Tea, TEA, Transparency, Explainability, and Accountability. He looked at just kind of the trust that is required on the part of both those creating these AI systems, putting them in place, and those using them. So it's a great read. I highly recommend it to everyone. But besides AI, we had a column from you about, whether online government needs a human co-pilot, government has to serve everyone. So what about the people who can't easily access digital services? How do you help them? And our executive editor, Noelle Nell, had a column about AI. So as I said, it is most of the issue, about a program at MIT that's creating these early education curriculum for students to really kind of teach from a very early age the next workforce, the next generation, how they can use these tools and what they are capable of.
Congratulations on the package, Lauren. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Paul.
The editorial and production team behind TFIC includes Theo Douglas, Zoe Manzanotti, and Kaylee Tedrow. Our executive editor is Noelle Nell. Our editor-in-chief is Kathleen Robinette. And that will do it for us this time around. For Ashley Silver, I'm Paul Taylor. Thanks for listening. Stay in touch with the show at tfic.tech.